Thank you all very much for coming out tonight. You know, I know coming out, spending your evening listening to a politician is not exactly what everybody wants to do. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your day and your evening to come do this. I'm gonna make sure I'm not yelling into this thing. It sounds very loud. Okay, good. My name is Grant Platner, and I'm running for United States Senate. The reason I'm doing it is I think that we need to fundamentally do politics differently in this country than the way we've done it for quite some time now. We have a political system that is entirely inaccessible to the average American. It is a political system that is not representative of the average person and therefore doesn't represent the average person. It is a politics that has been turned into a theater for elites. It's a performance that we watch with pundits on CNN, splashy TV ads, and it always costs more money than any of us could possibly fathom. It seems like something that is outside of the realm of possibility for those of us down in the real world to touch. And because of that, we have a political system that in many ways has ceased being representative of us. I think one of the best examples of this is the fact that we are now coming into over a month of a war that nobody seems to want. I just read that Donald Trump has postponed the destruction of a civilization for 2 weeks. So, well, somebody lives another day. And thank God for that. But at the exact same time, we are witnessing American military power be harnessed by quite possibly the stupidest people who have ever harnessed American military power, and that's saying a lot. But we have the situation we find ourselves in where when I go all over the state of Maine and talk to folks, nobody thinks this thing is a good idea. Everybody can see it for what it is. Everybody I talk to understands that this is a war that has been started because Donald Trump is in the Epstein files and he doesn't want us reading them. Everyone I talk to understands that this war has been started because Benjamin Netanyahu has been begging for it for 30 years and finally found a president who is stupid enough to do it. Everybody understands that this war is happening because it's good for the Saudi government and it's good for Raytheon executives. Because every time a Tomahawk missile blows up a girls' school, somebody makes an extra $1. Everybody gets this. Across the electoral spectrum. I'm talking to Republicans and Democrats and independents. I'm talking to people on the far left and people on the far right. And everybody gets this. And yet somehow we have a political establishment that can't do anything to stop it. That doesn't make any sense. If we live in a democracy, if we have democratic representation, how is it possible that this nation is going to war, being dragged into possibly decades of bloodshed, when everybody knows it's a bad idea, and yet somehow we have a political system that can't do anything to keep it from happening? You could not come up with a better example of how we have a politics that has ceased representing the will and the interests of the American people. I think many of us have known this already for some time. Many of us understand that we are looking at a political system that does not care about our input, that does not care about what we want to see in our society. Many of us have understood for quite some time that what's happening in Washington, D.C. is almost entirely separate from us and our world. And that the only people that have access are those with wealth and power. We have a political system in which if you have money, if you have power, you can see your needs represented in policy. But if you work 2 or 3 jobs, if you struggle to make rent, you will never see what you need in the policy that comes out of this kind of politics. It needs to change. It needs to end. And the hard part is, no one is coming to save us. It is not going to end because those in power are going to change their minds. The people that built the system that we live in today will not be the ones to unbuild it because they benefited from it, because they have succeeded in it, because in many ways it elevated them. It made them wealthier and more powerful. They're not going to be the ones to come and turn this ship around. We have to do it ourselves. But the good news is, as Americans, we have legacies to be proud of that show us how to do this. We have the legacy of the women's suffrage movement, the legacy of the labor movement, the legacy of the civil rights movement, of the disability rights movement, of the gay rights movement, of the gender equality movement, and none of these are legacies of asking permission. Women did not get the right to vote in this country because men gave it to them. They didn't get it because someone in power had a change of heart. They got it because they organized and they fought for it for decades. We didn't get an 8-hour workday or a 40-hour work week because somebody wrote another postcard to a congressman. We got it because working people organized and fought for what they needed in the streets, in the hills, and in the halls of power. We didn't get the Civil Rights Act because LBJ woke up one day and thought it was a good idea. We got it because organizers and activists put in decades of work, putting their lives on the line, being beaten, being murdered. But when the day came, they had built enough power to push back against the institutions. That's what got us the Civil Rights Act. These are the legacies we must understand now. We are entering a moment in American history that looks far more like the 1890s, the 1930s, the 1960s than it does the last 40 years. We are entering a moment in the political narrative of this country that is going to be about power. And in this society, power derives from 2 places: organized money or organized people. And the money is organized. It always has been, and it always will be, until we organize enough people to take it back. It is this tradition that we have to tap into now. And we have to understand that in these moments of crisis in the history of our democracy, whether it was the 1770s as we broke away from the British Empire, the 1860s and the battle against slavery, the 1930s and 40s as we pulled ourselves out of the Depression and then built the society that won the Second World War, in these moments, the Americans that rose to the occasion understood that they couldn't go back to what they had. It wasn't going to be enough to just protect the status quo that had brought them there in the first place. To protect the rights of their children, they needed to give them new rights. They needed to define a new version of freedom that had to look more expansive than the one before. We are in one of those moments of crisis. We are, without question, seeing the rise of fascism and authoritarianism in this country. We're going to need to fight it the old-fashioned way, which is building broad-based coalitions of labor unions and community organizations, of community groups, of individuals, of political parties. It all needs to be working in tandem to fight back against the creeping fascism that is in our society today. That's the only way we're going to do it. And to do that, We need to understand that the institutions are not going to do it for us. We cannot rely on the system that got us here to get us out of this mess. We cannot rely on the establishment politicians that year after year after year have sold out the working class of this country at the behest of those who donate the most money to them. We have watched, in my lifetime, I'm 41 years old, we in the state of Maine have watched the material conditions of working people in the state deteriorate in that short period of time. When I was a kid growing up in eastern Maine, I knew guys who put their kids through college as clam diggers. I knew people were sterning in the summer on a lobster boat, plowing driveways in the winter, making wreaths. That was enough. That hard scrabble existence, that hard work that Mainers for generations have taken immense pride in, that was enough to live a small but fulfilling life. That was enough to own the roof over your head. It was enough to put decent food on the table. It was enough to have your kid be able to attend a decent school. It was enough to even save a little bit for retirement. Today, it isn't enough anymore. Now those same people taking an extra shift at Walmart or Home Depot. That clam digger, he's not saving up to put his kid through college. That's an absurd concept now. In fact, those people are watching the communities that they worked hard to build fall apart because their children can't afford to live in them anymore. People my age and younger in the state can barely afford to buy a house. I bought my house in 2017. I was lucky. Today, my house has tripled in value, but my paycheck hasn't. I wouldn't be able to afford my home if I waited a couple more years. And I have a lot of friends who are in straits that they never thought they would find themselves in. People working jobs that they were told were going to set them up for success, and they can't afford to buy a home in the community they grew up in. We have watched all of that happen while we have witnessed the consolidation of wealth and power at the highest echelons in our society in a way that we can barely comprehend. In 1990, there were fewer than 80 billionaires in the United States. Today, there are over 900. When I look around, I do not see a state of Maine that is 10 times wealthier than 1990. We don't have 10 times the schools, 10 times the hospitals. Our paychecks don't go 10 times as far. Mainers don't have 10 times the free time. In fact, we have less. We have fewer schools, fewer hospitals. The goods and services we need to live our lives go up in prices, and our wages remain stagnant. We have watched life get harder down here while we witness somebody like Elon Musk exist. And these two things, they are not disconnected. They are part of the exact same story. In the time that we have watched the largest transfer of wealth from the working class to the ruling class in the history of this country, we have watched the immiseration of working people in this state. That is the exact same story. And that money did not get consolidated because those people worked hard. I refuse to believe that there is some metric of hard work that says that the people I know in Hancock County that work 3 or 4 jobs to keep a roof over their head, that somehow Elon Musk or Peter Thiel or Jeff Bezos worked so much harder than them that they deserve to be a billionaire and these people deserve to live in poverty. We're not asking for handouts. We're asking for hard work to be enough. It used to be, and it needs to be again. And the reason that these people got to consolidate as much money and power as they did, it wasn't because they worked hard, it's because they cheated. It's because they used their wealth and power to buy off politicians of both parties who spent the last 5 decades waging class war from above. They changed the rules on us. They changed the tax code. They gutted the social safety nets that we built in the 1930s and 40s, all to make sure that those with enough money and power could get more. The system that we live in, it isn't broken. It is functioning exactly as it was intended to. It is a system built by policies passed by establishment politicians that are meant to enrich the ultra-wealthy on the backs of the working people of this country. That's what it was meant to do, and it is doing it swimmingly. And what we need to understand is that it wasn't organic. The world that we live in, the economic system, the political system we're in today, it isn't natural. It didn't have to be like this. We live in the outcome of policy, and we need to change it. And the only way to do it is to build political power and put people into places of leadership and power who have a vision of the future that they want to fight for. My whole life, I have been told that dreaming big was ridiculous. I have been told my entire existence by those in places of power that looking for structural change, systemic change, dreaming of a better future and trying to make it, that was too idealistic. That the best we could ever hope to do was keep electing the same people over and over and over again because they understood how the system worked and they were going to go down there and they were going to get us crumbs in the margins. That's bullshit. And the reason I know that it is because we have done it before. As a good son of Maine, one of my heroes is a daughter of Maine, kind of, Frances Perkins. Though not born in Maine, her family's homesteads on the Damascotta River, and she did her best thinking there, and therefore Social Security is ours. Frances Perkins was the first woman cabinet member in American history. Goes up in the FDR administration in 1933 to serve as the longest serving Secretary of Labor in American history. And she went up into that place of power with the fundamental belief that the purpose of government is to provide good lives for all under its jurisdiction. She took that philosophy and she welded it to the political will and power that FDR had built, and they brought us Social Security. And Social Security wasn't a block grant. It wasn't a tax credit. It wasn't playing around in the margins of an existing policy. They invented it out of whole cloth. They believed that a society that cannot take care of its elderly is no society at all. It was that understanding. It was that understanding of politics and of power that built the New Deal programs that pulled this country out of the Depression and built the society that won the Second World War and the worldwide battle against fascism. It was those programs that brought about in the 50s and 60s a society that, despite all of its horrific faults, had the smallest margin of wealth inequality we have ever had in this nation's history. It built a society that had the highest union density we ever had in this nation's history. And this was not a politics of thinking that the future was something we just had to marginally try new things with. It was a politics that had a vision of the future that was better for all. and an understanding that we needed political will and power to pass the policies to bring it about. This nation electrified all of rural America in the 1930s in less than a decade. We did it because we understood that if rural communities were to survive in the future, they needed electricity. But the market wasn't going to do it because the profit margins weren't there. And so we decided that as America, we were gonna do it. And we invested heavily in it. And we used political will and power to make it happen. We built the Tennessee Valley Authority that created the energy to power the Southeast. We had the Works Projects Administration and the CCC. We can have these things again. And I know that we can because we had them once before. It isn't ridiculous to dream big. It's a necessity. The challenges we now face with our healthcare system, with our housing system, with our education system, with our energy system, with the coming challenges of climate change, these are not going to be fixed in the margins. These are going to require massive political will and public investment to get it done. Because the only way we're going to get it done is if we understand that we are building a society for all of us. We are not structuring things just so another corporation can have better shareholder payouts. We need to understand that we have it in our power to build a better world. In the words of Thomas Paine, we have it in our power to make the world over again. It was that revolutionary promise that set this nation on its path, and we have failed to live up to it. But the only time, the only moments in our history where we have moved the ball forward, it is when Americans understand that it is only through building power at the ground level, in pushing back against the institutions and the systems, that's when we win. That's when we move the ball forward towards justice and equality and decency. Those are the legacies that we must be proud of as Americans and tap into now in this moment, because we are at a unique moment in American history. No one wants to live in interesting times. But we do. We are in a moment that years from now is going to be seen as a crossroads. We have multiple paths in front of us. One of them is very clear. That is the path of fascism. It is the path of bigotry and hatred, of racism and xenophobia. That is not an option. If we go down that path, our lives and the lives of our children and their children will be nothing but horror shows as the ultra-rich continue to grind us deeper and deeper into the hole, and they hold themselves up into their private islands and castles behind barbed wire and guns. That is not a future for working people. The future that we need to build is one where we understand that when we elevate everyone in our society elevates. A future in which we don't give people handouts, we just give them the benefits of the hard work we all put in. We just give people the chance to live up to their full potential. It's a chance that I got. I have the unique luck of being a disabled combat veteran. I am lucky enough that in my 4 combat tours, I got blown up enough times the VA thinks I deserve health care. And that is a ridiculous statement, but in this society, it is luck. Because that health care gave me the foundational support that allowed me to figure out what kind of life I actually wanted to live. It gave me freedom. It gave me the freedom to move back to my hometown and figure out how to make a living on the sea. It gave me the time to sink my intellect and my body into mastering the skills necessary to be an oyster farmer and a diver. It gave me real liberty to live a life that was fulfilling. The bar to that kind of support should not be having to fight in stupid foreign wars like I had to. In a society that has as much as we do, that spends as much as we spend on health care, there is no excuse that not every single American gets the same kind of support I got. We have the ability to do these things because we are the wealthiest society in the history of humanity. It's just that the wealth is distributed in the wrong way. And it's holding us back. I often think, what does Eastern Maine look like when my hardworking creative neighbors don't have to worry about copays or premiums or in-network or out-of-network, or don't have to hold jobs that they hate because it's the only way they can have access to health insurance? What new businesses do we get? What art gets made? What risks get taken? What research and development happens on the ground level when we just give people the basic support to have a little bit of extra time? Because it isn't just about the money, it's about the energy. It's about the anxiety. It's about paying in year after year to a health insurance company that when the day comes that you need a procedure, they run an AI program that tells you you don't qualify. That is not how we should be functioning as a society. We need to make all of that go away. And we can with a universal health care system. We need a tax code that's going to tax wages at a lower rate than we tax wealth. Because right now we do the opposite. Well, that's a math equation you can run to the end. We need to remove the cap on Social Security contributions so we can fund Social Security forever and all time and expand benefits so Americans can retire earlier. We need to get money out of politics. We need to overturn Citizens United. We need to put a ban on senators and congresspeople trading stocks and bonds because that's just corruption. We need a Senate and a Congress that is going to reassert its authority around war making. Because the Constitution was very clear that the power to make war should rest on the shoulders of the bodies that are most directly representative of the American people, because when this country goes to war, it is the American people who have to shoulder the burden. For that reason, we need a new War Powers Act that claws back all the power that Congress has abdicated for decades to the executive. We need to look at our future and how we use energy. We have to get off fossil fuels. And we have to do it in a way that is not just going to prioritize corporate profits. We need industrial planning around our energy grid in this country. And when we build it, it needs to be built with union labor. These things are a necessity for our future. I honestly believe that these are not optional. We cannot continue into a better future without massive systemic change. And everybody knows it. Every single person I talk to in the state of Maine, when I go around and I talk to independents and I talk to Democrats and I talk to Republicans, I talk to people that don't even care about politics. And when I ask them, do you think you live in a political and economic system that has your best interests at heart? Nobody says yes. Everybody knows. Everybody knows that this system is built to screw working people. And our grievance and our anger and our resentment about it, it manifests itself in so many ways. And what we need in this country is a clear political message about who is to blame. Because it isn't immigrants, it's not trans kids, it's billionaires, it's corporations, it's Wall Street, it's private equity, it's Silicon Valley as it manipulates our feelings and commodifies our entire being. That is who all of our rage needs to be directed at. And the only way for us to do it is to find common ground with each other down here in the real world. Because at the end of the day, the material needs of working people in the state of Maine are exactly the same. It doesn't matter who you voted for when the hospital closes. It doesn't matter if it's an R or a D or an I next to your name when you walk into a ballot booth, because the hospital closed. It doesn't matter how you identify politically if your children have to leave this place because they can't afford to live there. Your community dies the exact same way, regardless. We need to understand that the longer we keep pointing fingers left and right at each other, it keeps us from pointing fingers in the only direction that matters, and that is up. Building common ground again is the task ahead of us, and it is going to be very, very difficult. It is going to be very uncomfortable. And it's going to require all of us to go out there into our communities and do the hard work. So I'm not here today just asking you to vote for me. And I'm not here asking you just to donate money to me, although for the love of God, please donate money. To get money out of politics, we have to raise an immense amount of money. It's a deeply frustrating reality. What I'm really here asking you for is to show up, to put some skin in the game. We're asking for your time. We're asking for your labor. We're asking for your energy, for your commitment, because organizing needs to be done at the ground level, in your workplace, in your community, in your school, amongst your friends, amongst people who are your neighbors who may no longer be your friends, and you have to go rebuild those relationships. And that is hard. But we have to. Because if we don't, we will not be able to build the power to win. And we have to win. Losing for the working people of this country is not an option. We need to beat back the powers that have exploited and oppressed us all for generations. And it is a long fight. Yes, we need to get rid of Susan Collins. Yes, we have to turn the Senate blue. But we also have to understand that to get the things that we need for the future, that's not going to be enough. The junior senator from Maine is not going to be enough to get Medicare for all. One junior senator from Maine is not going to be enough to change the tax code. We need to combine institutional power with real power, the power of organized people. And we need to build it now. Because when we need it, we won't have time to build it. When the day comes when we have to fight back against fascism, if we didn't put the work in today, we will not have the power then. And we're going to need it. It's why this country waged war on organized labor for the last 50 years. Because those in places of power knew that organized workers, that was the best way for people to advocate and fight for themselves. And so we went on a multi-decade concerted attack against it. We now need to understand that it is not just organizing in our workplaces that's going to get us out of this. It's organizing in our communities. It's building relationships with labor unions, relationships with community groups. And I'll be honest, if you want to sign up in the Graham Platner campaign and join one of the 15,000 active volunteers we have in the state, we can surely use you. But if you don't, go join the food pantry. Volunteer at a wood bank. Join a labor union, join Maine People's Alliance, join a local community group. It doesn't matter what you do, it just matters that you do something. It's all part of the same fight. And when we've done this, when we have built this power, when we have fought back fascism, when we've protected our democracy, when we've saved freedom, it needs to be a different kind of freedom this time. Not merely a romantic freedom of individual rights, but a freedom that is real. A freedom that is material. The freedom to have time. The freedom to have energy. The freedom to not live with anxiety and fear. The freedom to take risks, to start a business, to make art, to write a book, to fall in love, to raise a family. The freedom to own the roof over your head when you do it. The freedom to live lives defined not by struggle and scraping by, but of dignity and fulfillment. Thank you. Susan Collins hasn't held one of these since I was in elementary school and Bill Clinton was president. So, and in the spirit of that, we don't screen questions. We don't have any kind of weird screening process. It utterly confuses the DC types who are like, but how do you control the messaging? I'm like, you guys are engaged in a different kind of politics than the kind of politics I'm engaged in. So if you have a question, just raise your hand and I will point to you.
When you go to the United States Senate, how do you intend to use the Byzantine tools like Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema use to block Build Back Better, to block the transformational change that you are prescribing?
Well, one of the things we need to do is we need to get rid of the structural impediments that allowed them to do that in the first place, one of those being the 3/5 filibuster. The filibuster has been used for a very long time as a weapon against policy that is good for the working class of this country. It's been used over and over and over again. I'm a big fan of Senator Jeff Merkley's idea. He actually wrote a whole book on this that I highly recommend, which is bring back the speaking filibuster. The talking filibuster required senators to, one, make a bit of a sacrifice, go stand on the floor and talk for a while. Two, there is an end to it. You can only filibuster, you run out of people, and eventually you're gonna have to have a vote. His argument, and I actually take it, I think it's a fairly decent one, is that that does allow to build in time for more discussion about bills of large impact. But it does have an end date. The problem with the 3/5 filibuster as it currently stands is that it just means that if you don't have the votes, you don't even have a discussion. That's it, it's just over. And it allows people like Manchin and Sinema, one, to elevate themselves personally to become these kind of divas, where they can say, oh, look at me, I'm the most important person because I've decided that poor kids don't deserve money anymore. Which, by the way, Joe Manchin is a huge asshole for that one. Returning to the speaking filibuster is, I think, going to be a necessity. I know there are arguments. People are like, well, right now, if we didn't have the filibuster, then the Republicans might have passed the SAVE Act. It is possible. I will say, I don't think the Republican Party really cares about what the rules say when they really need it to matter. And fundamentally, I almost want to get rid of the filibuster, ram through universal health care, ram through universal child care, ram through a changing of the tax code to go after all the money where it is, and then reinstate it. And then make the Republican Party come down here and take those things from the American people. I mean, we got to start playing like we're playing to win. The other side We also, over the next couple of years, we need to be creative about how we use the Byzantine vagaries of Senate rules on how to slow this mess down.
Absolutely.
I mean, if we don't get the majority, if we're in the minority, one, I don't think a single Democratic senator should ever vote for a nominee that comes out of this administration ever again. We shouldn't vote to fund insanity like ICE or like these wars overseas. We need to cut funding for this stuff. But we also, there are lots and lots of little annoying paperwork things that even one senator who's engaged in that project, you can slow stuff down. You can throw some wrenches in the works. And if the Trump administration continues on the path that it's on, we're gonna have to start getting creative about that. If we get the majority, then it's committee hearings time. And we need to spend the next 2 years shutting down the White House because we subpoena every single person in it every single day. We drag ICE agents in front of a Senate committee and make them take their masks off. We make the people that sent them out into the streets to terrorize and murder American citizens explain to us on camera why they thought that was a constitutional idea. We shut it down with investigations, and then we do something that we should have done a long time ago. We use the power of the Supreme Court we use the power of the Senate to impose on the Supreme Court. Because truthfully, things like universal health care, things like overturning Citizens United, if we continue to treat this Supreme Court like a functional constitutional body that's acting in good faith, we're going to continue to lose. Because they've really just become a political action wing of corporate conservatism in this nation. And we need to treat it as such. And I'll be honest, one of the reasons I know we have to do this is that we can look to inspiration from our past, to Abraham Lincoln, who ignored the court for 4 years. And thank God he did, because we might have lost the war to end slavery if he hadn't. We can look to FDR, who threatened to pack the court, even at the anger of his own party. But he did it, and it worked. He put political pressure on the court, and that saved the New Deal programs that allowed us to continue to drag ourselves out of the Depression. We got to get creative about power. And we have to be honest about American history. Because if we aren't honest about how power has been used in our history, if we continue to insist that power is only derived from the institutions and the norms and the words on the page, we're going to lose to people that do not give a damn. This administration breaks the law every single day. It defies the Constitution every single day. And when we have power again, it doesn't mean we break the law. It means we get creative about how we use it. And we need to end with this charade that's been going on for years with people in places of democratic power who every single time we find ourselves back in control, somebody comes along and says, but the parliamentarian said. The first time anybody mentions the parliamentarian to me in the Senate, I'm going to blow my lid. We need to Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell is a very effective senator. And we may not like it, but he understood how to use the rules. He understood how to use the Byzantine system to his benefit. He got a Supreme Court justice when he was in the minority and technically didn't have any power. He simply said, no, it's too close to an election. A couple years later, when Republicans are back in power, when it's even closer to an election, suddenly that norm didn't mean anything anymore. Now, when you're playing against people who are going to set their own rules, you got to start setting your own yourself. And so it's not just merely knowing how to use those internal structures in the Senate. I also think we need to start getting creative about how the Senate uses its own power on elements outside of the Senate, like the Supreme Court. Until we do that, I fear that we are not going to be able to make the structural changes necessary. If we say that you can't have money in politics, and the Supreme Court comes along and just tells us that it's unconstitutional again, what do we got? We need to understand that we need to impose, and I'll be honest, if the Senate, if it chose to, can exercise ethics oversight of the Supreme Court. If we chose to, we could hold Supreme Court justices to the same ethics standards that we hold all other federal judges. And if we did that, there is a compelling case for the impeachment and removal of at least 2 of them. So, I'm going to get somebody from the other side. Yes, sir.
As a follow-up of that, and to achieve some of the wonderful things that you said and everybody agreed with today, I haven't heard any politicians talk about this because of the dysfunction and the absolute corruption of at least 2 of the U.S. Supreme Courts. What are your thoughts about having movement for a second Bill of Rights to amend the Constitution like we did to have women vote? And for me, the First Amendment would be overturning United.
Yeah.
Corporations are not people. They cannot contribute any money to political campaigns. Individuals can only contribute $1,000 a year in any election year. Number 2, term limits, 18 years for Congress, 18 years for Supreme Court and other federal judges. You know, I'm a retired physician. I'm 73. I'm not practicing because I'm too old. To have 80, 90-year-old Supreme Court justices when the Constitution was founded, life expectancy was less than 50.
Yeah.
In 20 years, it could be 100. To have these people there forever. Another one is presidential pardons have to be limited. No family members, nobody who's contributed to your corporate contribution or to have business. So there's so many things, even though it's very, very difficult to amend the Constitution, the people need to do that now. And what are your thoughts about starting a movement to at least start thinking of that?
I mean, I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, the Constitution is a living document. It was meant to be a living document. Because of, I'll just be upfront. I honestly think that the reason we don't think that it's actually doable anymore is because we've had almost 50 years of a ossified political leadership that has existed in this very transactional version of politics that elevated people who are unable to dream. We have decades of people who fundamentally do not think that imagination has a place in politics. I think it absolutely does. I think it needs to. There is no question that creating new constitutional amendments is going to be very difficult. I'm not going to say that it isn't. I do think we need to be having a much more public discussion about it. I also think that people in places of political power with a lot of visibility need to start talking about the ability to amend the Constitution as a thing that is possible, not a thing that we just keep looking at as well, we haven't done it since the 70s, and therefore I guess we can never do it again, which is quite ridiculous. That said, I also, so in 1944, FDR unveiled his second Bill of Rights, the Economic Bill of Rights. FDR believed that while we had democratized our politics, we had never democratized our economy. We had this as a concept once in the 1940s. Had we brought that about then, we would live in a very, very different system than the one we have today. And so I think we need to be creative. I am all for using the Constitution itself and constitutional conventions, but I also think we need to do what FDR did, which is look at the legislative process as a possible place of also defining and giving those new rights to working Americans. One more question. This time we're going to have to go to someone in the back, back wall. Sorry, these lights are really bright and I can actually not see very much. Yeah, I think you're wearing a hat. Yep, sweet.
things.
Oh boy, I'm glad we'd saved this for the last one.
First of all, I know you have certain words you need to use on your campaign, but I really feel that we need to stop calling them elites. They are parasites, and they have underdeveloped brains that cause them not to feel empathy and drive them to fear and greed. And it's plain and simple.
I think that absolutely describes Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and Alex Karp and the rest of those weirdos.
So I'm glad you're on the same page. Second, I think we need to all continue to keep fighting for the Wabanaki people and
Yes.
the indigenous people.
Before you get to the last thing, I just want to say on that front, the first bill that I intend to work on in the Senate is a Senate companion bill to the one Jared Golden put in the House that got killed in committee, which would extend to the Wabanaki tribes of Maine the same tribal sovereignty rights that all 570 other federally recognized tribes get.
And finally, I think that true change comes from within all of us. So everybody just take a moment just to take a deep breath and feel the real connection here in the room. We have some serious power and serious energy, and just know it starts within each and every moment as much as you can. Thank you.
On that note, what I want you to do right now is just look around. I just want you to see other people in the room. Maybe recognize somebody from your community that you didn't expect to be here. If you see somebody in here who you know that you're actually surprised might have similar politics or might want to fight for the same thing, what I ask is in the next 2 weeks, go have coffee with that person. Build a closer relationship. Organizing isn't complicated. It's just really, really hard. It means that you really have to put yourself out there. You have to build new relationships, new friendships. You have to go out in your community and you have to tell people what you believe. That is difficult on a fundamental level, and you have to do it anyways. And so take this moment tonight. These rooms, when we do this, these town halls, it's for me to hear and ask questions. It's for me to tell you about my vision of the future, but it's an organizing tool in and of itself. People come to these things from the communities they live in, and it really is important that you build relationships with folks who you didn't know beforehand. And as we move forward, make sure that those relationships grow. It's the only way that we're actually going to build power. I really appreciate you all coming out tonight. I'm going to finish with 2 things. I legitimately need your money. We don't take corporate PAC money. I don't take money from special interest groups like fossil fuel companies or like APAC. We take money from individual donors and PACs that are affiliated with labor unions and other ideologically similar groups who are only allowed to give us $5,000 anyway, so it's actually not that much money. Because of this, we need to raise a lot of money. And when we're not taking money from the big places, it means we need a lot of people to donate a little bit of money. And we've been very lucky throughout this whole thing, but we can continue to use the support. Monthly recurring donations are the most helpful thing you could do for us. 10, 15, 20 bucks a month actually means a lot more than $100 today, because it allows us to look into the future, and it knows how much money we're gonna have to cover payroll, knows how much money we're gonna have to cover specific costs. That allows us to plan. And being able to plan, that gives us a much better footing to build out the infrastructure necessary to win this election in November. And so if you have the ability to do so, we can surely use it. And the last thing is we need you. Please sign up. We've got a lot of volunteers. We need more. By the time this thing is done, we're going to need to have built something bigger than anyone has ever seen in the history of the state of Maine. That is what is necessary. We are in a unique moment in American history, and many years from now, people are going to remember what happens now. People are going to understand that this was a moment where America had multiple diverging paths, and if we take the right one, we get to look at this moment in this year in the state of Maine with an immense amount of pride. And I just ask you to join us on that journey and in that fight. Thank you all very much.